Hello, online pipe community. Ethan, Parsimonious Piper here. Today we are diving right back into Morsels or mental manducation with some more C.S. Lewis Mere Christianity. But first, in a lovely, see if you can see the grain on that, pipe by Lee Belge, which is a cutty minus the foot. I have another bowl of Gatlin Burlier's Cumberland. A rather tasty, medium English crossover. Good stuff. Recap. We got through book 1, The Moral Law. We are diving now into book 2, which again has 5 chapters. This is going to be chapter 1. Book 2 now concerns itself with what do Christians believe about this moral law. So chapter 1, which is our 6th episode, is about the rival conceptions of God. Lewis begins the chapter by reminding Christians of something that many Christians are uncomfortable with, and that is you don't have to dispense with everything from every other religion on the planet. You see, truth is truth, and truth can be found in many places. It is not only found in our Bible. Oh, I know that's shocking to many Christians. Give you an example. Now, there's some disagreement as to whether this is Confucian or Buddhist, but there is an Eastern saying, proverb, that says, in vernacular English, it says, don't do to other people things that you wouldn't want them to do to you. Sound fairly familiar? Well, that's a true statement. That is, in fact, a good moral piece of advice. Christianity takes that a step further. Jesus didn't say in the passive, don't do. He said, do. Do to others as you would have them do to you. They're similar truths. They are both truths. So we need to dispense with this idea that everything outside of Christianity is not true. Probably lose a few of you viewers right there. Maybe some of the rest of you will stay. I don't know. The fact is that, and this will probably frighten off a few more of my viewers, the fact is that while we believe that their overall beliefs are not correct, Muslims, for example, are more correct than atheists are. Lewis likens this to a mathematical problem. A mathematical problem has but one answer. All other answers are in fact wrong, but some answers are less wrong than others. If an engineer were building a bridge and, say, the correct tension of the suspending cables is supposed to be X, where X is some very, very, very large number on some scale, then you probably don't want to go across that bridge if the bridge, instead of having tension X, has tension 1/10 of X. But X minus 1, that's close enough that you would probably trust the bridge. It's not the right answer, but it may be closer than many, many, many wrong answers. There may be some truth in it, even if it is not correct. And in the end, even a small difference may make the bridge collapse after many years. As with all analogies, it's not perfect, but you get the drift. We don't have to dispense with everything. There is truth in the world all around us. Truth is truth. No matter where it's found. The rest of this chapter dives into, then, our conceptions of God. In the first book, we dealt with the first two major divisions of humanity, and that is those who believe in a God and those who don't, the materialist or atheist view of the universe. If you are still watching these videos, then the chances are you are not putting all of your faith in what we demonstrated scientifically through mathematical probability is almost impossible to have happened. And that is the materialist view of the universe. And if you do, then if you're still here, you're at least interested in seeing where does this take us. So we have two camps. Among those who do believe in some form of God, there are too many variants to address all of them. He was doing this in a radio show. I'm trying to do this in a relatively short video. They fall into two major camps that Lewis distinguishes them. And those would be people. I'm going to get this match lit so I can relight my pipe. People who believe that God is outside of any sense of good and evil or morality. And those who believe that God is actually concerned with morals. The former mostly fall into pantheistic religions. He uses Hinduism, but Hinduism, there are so many flavors of Hinduism, many, or if not most of which, are polytheistic, not really pantheistic. Pantheistic would be more variants of Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism. As well as derivatives of some Western pantheist philosophers like Spinoza and Hegel. But the majority of our world is dominated by three religions: Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Monotheistic religions. Polytheism, the belief in many gods, like Hinduism, many animist religions in African, South American, etc. Places. Those present a different issue. But in the end, the issue does come back to, is God or the gods concerned with morality or not? In the case of polytheism, if it's gods and if they are concerned with morality, then where did they get their morality from? We just push the issue off 1 degree. Now, Lewis reveals what I think is a a really incredible internal debate that he had. And rather than just regurgitate his debate, I encourage you to read it, because he talks about how his view of good and evil and just and unjust tempered or flavored his atheism for a very long time. Instead of just regurgitating that, I'm going to approach this from just a slightly different direction, and that is to look at the idea of pantheism, which is that, generally speaking, again, generalities, we don't have time to get into all of the details of every flavor of pantheism. Generally speaking, pantheism is something that sees God as an integral part of the universe, not really separate from it. As a Christian, and from our discussion in Book 1, where we see that the moral law is it is outside of our universe, and so the sender of that moral law must be outside of the created physical universe. When I look at a pipe, for example, I see evidence of the artisan who created it, but I don't see the artisan who created it. And for me, the same thing is true in the universe. I see the evidence of a designer, but I believe that designer is outside the creation, in the same way that his communication of the moral law to us is outside of that creation. Now, another aspect of this, in addition to the theism versus pantheism, get that tamped back down and relit. Is the question of whether God is concerned with morality. And I would posit that our previous discussion of the moral law and its universality is an indication that this God is concerned with good and evil. Lewis discusses this in terms of seeing the universe as being cruel and unjust. And if that's the case, how could a good God have created it? But that leads us to the question of, how do we know that something is unjust? How do you know that a line is crooked if you've never seen a straight line to compare it to? In many of the same ways, how do we know that our sense of justice, our sense of goodness, how do we know that that's solid if we don't have something, a standard to compare it to? And this is where the moral law comes in. The ubiquity, the universality of this moral law indicates that it is, in fact, a standard that we can compare just to and unjust. And so the Christian view of God is that God is, in fact, a good God, and God is a moral God. God put the universe in place. He doesn't control it, and therefore we have evil because the universe has gone off the rails. Humanity, as we've discussed before, humanity does not live up to the moral law that we know to be true. This causes all kinds of problems for us. But it doesn't tell us that God himself is not good, or that God is not interested in good. Quite the contrary. The fact that we know what's right and wrong tells us that this God is interested, quite frankly, in morality, in good. And that, my friends, is where we leave off this chapter. Read ahead. Don't comment ahead. We'll get back to this either next week or the week after. And we'll pick up with chapter 2, our 7th installment, chapter 2 of book 2. With that, folks, light something you like. Do it in a pretty pipe. I just love these classic shapes. And enjoy your evening.